My name is Pyle. I do a lot of exploit development, reverse engineering. I'm really into cryptography and Polyglot exploitation. So I'm not really heavy on social media. But if you want to talk to me, feel free. I have information at the last slide. But that's my GitHub. I occasionally put some stuff out that I'm interested in doing and what have you. So I'm not going to bore you with a bio or anything else because I'm going to tell you a story. I come from a different time. And I'm here to warn you, which is funny is like, I didn't know what the theme of the conference was, and I have been doing this research or whatever, and it kind of like, funny when I put this together, I was like, wait a second, this fits perfectly. I am old enough that I was around before the internet. I was hacking before the internet even really existed. Like, I started really young. Like, I used a 2400 baud modem and WinSock and all these other things to navigate the internet when I was like in middle school. And it's given me a really unique perspective on a lot of things. So I have lived through mainframes to micros to desktop to internet to cloud, what have you. And to be honest with you, it sucked, right? When you're developing new technology and all these new things, we're really like worried about like creating something or giving ourselves space. And automation is something that comes later, or ease of use. We're seeing this in LLM and AI right now. It's like, oh, we kind of built this MCP thing all of a sudden because we want to make it easier, all these other things. And like that kind of design and these decisions when we're starting a technology early, it's like a lot of headaches. And it was really hard to go find things on the old interwebs. And it got more readable, whatever. But when they're writing standards and they're going through these things, you got to remember that they always want things to be backwards compatible and forward capable. Which means I want to make sure that when this standard was written 20, 30 years later, we can copy this and make it compatible. But also, like, we're going to build some functionality in. The very first hacking book I ever read is that book. And if you ever get a chance to read it, it's out of print. It's a little hard to find. It's called Out of the Inner Circle. I was in 7th grade. Very funny story. I got it in 7th grade from the library and never returned it. Like, I'll admit, I'm not that guy. I'm super ethical, super lawful, but I was in 7th grade, and I'm like, this is like the uncut dope. So I'm saying what a horrible future we live in. And it's like side of a warning. Most people back then literally had no idea what was about to happen. Like, this is 92, 93, a little bit before that, a little after. And what was the whole vibe, as you kids like to say? We were building new stuff, and think about this as like an analogy today, because that's really what I talk about is, we were building new stuff, vibe coding, and building new capabilities, like AI LLMs, and we were loosely defining all of these borders because what? We didn't really know what we were doing or thinking about it, and then we also want to make sure we can expand and aren't nailed down to standards. Some things lost, well, some things won, Bitcoin, some things lost, NFTs, stuff like that. But it's not like NFTs are going anywhere. They may not have become what you thought they were, but there's going to be infrastructure and support for that for a very long time because people spent money on it, people are still trying to make it work, what have you. But the important thing was we were talking to each other. All these things that we have today are there. In fact, the internet was not at all king. We didn't know anything, really, in general public the way we do now about how any of this works. Essentially, the internet was a weird sled for protocols that annoyed me and my BBS friends because you're like, I understand how that works, now I gotta go learn this thing. And what I'll tell you is that like studying RFCs, particularly when you're looking at technologies or building them now, like putting this together, study those things in the emerging standards for a lot of reasons. There's always gold in them. And it's kind of funny, like you read this article, it's like once in a while, advertisements or pictures, this is 1994, pictures show a lot of people are getting into the mosaic craze. The internet is going to be the popular choice for companies in the 21st century for advertisement. Pretty prophetic, right? Like you got some stuff in there. Same thing, we're talking about IRC. Discord is just IRC. Anybody who's ever played with it, like it's just IRC. All of these things are happening and like we're living through it. So let me go back to a first RFC. Anybody know what RFC 1918 is? Anybody's done networking? Yeah, it's like private internal IP address. This is written 2 years later. RFCs are important, right? They really are. With the proliferation of TCP/IP technology and blah, 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 increasing number of non-connected enterprises use this technology and its addressing capabilities for sole intra-enterprise communications without intention to directly connect it to the internet, right? Internet has grown beyond anyone's expectations, sustained exponential growth. Like, this is an RFC that was written to fix an earlier thing where we were like, nobody's going to use 4.3 billion IP addresses. And then you're like, wait, we kind of do. But this is like 2 years after that article, right? This is the important part, especially now you're building new cool technology. RFCs are important, and building it the right way, because you never know what's going to happen, right? When you write a standard, this takes years to put together, to talk about. And what happens is what? We forget things, right? How many developers are out there like, oh, we'll fix that later, we'll patch that up later, and you're like, 20 years later, like, it's still there. We add fixes. We don't go back and change standards because by the time it's become that big, it's written in stone, essentially. Now, funny kind of upshot of that is here. Everything is a proxy if you try hard enough. Network protocols are, this is how I had to learn this. They're just raw text protocols, right? Nothing bound to a port or anything about it cares about what's going on below it, right? Your OSI model, it's a layer 7. Below that, app doesn't care, doesn't worry about it. It's designed to do that. So you have all these protocols that are just core to the internet, HTTP, SMTP, FTP. These are all things you're probably using today because like, that's how it works. It's just encoded text sent over a raw network socket. But those were not the only protocols the internet was ever built on. Anybody remember Gopher? Old enough like me to like remember Gopher? Like, I still love Gopher. I'm like the big, it's still out there. A lot of people even, like, it's still supported. Modern browsers were still supporting Gopher until a couple years ago. And I was upset because I really liked Gopher and I really hated HTTP. But there was a point in the world where that was not winning. So armed with all this knowledge, how this all works, and I trust me when I say this, you can create Polyglot payloads, tunnel over net, you can do pretty much whatever you want. If you go back and look at that moment in time when they wrote this and went, what were they thinking? What were they not thinking? And years later, now that we understand the emergent properties of these systems, you can go back with a different eye and go, ooh, I found something. So here's the funny part. That article was actually written by me in high school in 1994. RIP AOL dial-up. But really, like that was it. That's how we learned. I had to learn Unix as like 12 years old to go download Mortal Kombat FAQs, right? We just rebooted Mortal Kombat. People are doing the same damn thing all over again. It doesn't change. It's just the details of how we do it. So here's your challenge. Throw out all of your assumptions about everything, including RFCs. RFCs, request for comment, right? I want you to divorce yourself entirely from these ideas that HTTP is a well-defined standard. Anybody think that? It's not. DNS isn't even a well-defined standard, neither are port numbers. Here's a question. Anybody know what port SMTP is supposed to work on? Go ahead, say it. 25? Anybody else got a different one? Good answer. But the answer really is there's no official port for anything. They're called the commonly used ports because way back then, we didn't have things like virtual hosting or all these other things that make that easier. Like you literally had to go out onto the internet itself and find a text file that gave you sites and the ports they were on and the services they were using. That's why I had to put it in here. Like here, you have to find the FTP for Rutgers. Like nobody told you that. So you have to also understand that web servers are not the only thing that can handle HTTP or raw text requests. My favorite, I am a nut for the OSI model. I think it's one of the most abused things ever because every networking book you've ever read spends the first 4 chapters explaining the same thing to you over and over again. It's important, read it, but don't waste your time. It's important, and I love when I have this argument, people are like, layer 6 doesn't matter, right? Everybody's like, layer 6 is the layer nobody cares about, right? Totally wrong. The thing you gotta remember is the entire modern internet is built from the emergent functionality of that stuff. And that was written 30 years ago. HTML is hypertext markup language. It's literally just a markup language. HTTP is a transport for it, and we just happen to be lucky enough that it's human readable, right? Otherwise, you wouldn't be able to do cross-site scripting and all those other things you do in like burp, whatever. All these things are just raw socket protocols. On the right here, I have the RFC for HTTP verbs. We're going to get into that. So here's a question. How many verbs are there? Or methods? Everybody's got like a different, like we can't even agree on that. How many verbs methods are there? Anybody want to take a shot? I was waiting for that. The fact is, nobody actually can tell you this. Like you Google it, 7, 8, 9, 2, whatever. Like nobody will give you an answer that is actually, one, correct, but two, agrees with anybody else. Read this thing. All general purpose servers must support get and head. All other methods are optional. Like you're writing this into the standard, and you go in here like, by the way, and this is in the standard, additional methods outside the scope have been standardized. You ought to be registering them, but how many people actually do that? I could sit off and rattle 30 verbs I know exist, prop, find, track, like all these ones that are used for either HTML and HTTP or something else entirely that we're tunneling stuff over. They're very specific, and there's some shoulds, and you're like, why is there a should? Set of allowed methods can change. That's why we have options. Right? So like on the left-hand side in the standard, that's like 8 methods right there, right? I'm going to zero in on one. Trace. Anybody ever use trace? It's buried, it's old. It was really only used in a couple of web servers, but it's essentially, when you think about HTTP, it's like a diagnostic, it literally is described as like a loopback. It's a request you send to a web server, and what it's supposed to do is basically just give you the debugging output of it. It isn't supported anymore. Very few tools look for it, and when you do, they're like, that's old, it's nonsense, don't pay attention to it. It's a vestigial DNA of the 90s, right? Still around, was around for 2000, but it's there. Look on that side. It requests a remote application loopback for the request message, right? Like it excludes some fields, returns a 200, yada, yada, yada. Client must not generate header fields in a trace request. Like you shouldn't be doing that. The final recipient should exclude any request header fields. And again, at the bottom, a client must not send a body in a trace request. So this is the head scratcher. I want you to look at this. What is wrong with that picture? It's a trace request. It has a body. And what is the body? It's an SMTP conversation. If you've ever gone in and manually typed in an SMTP message to test it, that's what you test. You go in there, enter, EHLO, whatever. But I sent this as a web request. The host header, as you see it like right in there, it's sending to 587, so bonus points to whoever pulled that off. But on the right-hand side, Burp Collaborator's SMTP daemon is answering me, sends a bunch of commands that, or it says, this is all nonsense, and then all of a sudden it goes, hey, there's an email here. Why? The request was submitted via my browser on HTTP, but you look at the other side and it came out as SMTP. Get trace options. These are all things you're not supposed to ever have a body for. My host header is saying to go to 587, and the body is valid SMTP. Even the Burp Collaborator says this is a valid SMTP thing. Like, so immediately, this is an excellent C2 exfiltration tunneling thing just because of that. What is happening on the right-hand side is that those HTTP headers are being processed as nonsensical SMTP commands, hits the body, and then goes, let's go. It's no different than like a SQL injection, right? It's going to run in there, get to the part it cares about, truncate, go out. Almost every web control you see is going to tell you on the web side, like Proxy, web application firewall, tell you this is an unsuccessful HTTP session. Because what it's doing is looking for that code and it never gets one. So it never thinks it went there. My client did not create a DNS request or HTTPS request. It was handled by an intercepting proxy. And here's proof of concept. This is a Polyglot HTTP SMTP payload. It's the exact same thing, and in 2 different protocols, you have valid payload. It works. Why? If I send this on a correct port, 80, 443, whatever else, It will process, and I have it up there, Collaborator, processing that, right? It sends back, that's the payload, that's the HTTP payload. It receives it, identifies it as an HTTP request, sends the header, ignores the rest. That is a valid, deprecated, incorrectly structured HTTP request. Send the exact same thing on port 587, the exact same request. And you see better what's happening. See the highlight, like it took the trace command and went, that's not an EHLO or an HELO. And just kind of just parsed through until it got there and then went, there's the email. Now, if you'll notice here, I didn't actually send the period at the end of that email to finish it. Anybody know why? I am a denial of service and general havoc person. So if you think about a proxy receiving 10,000 of these requests and waiting for SMTP to time out, you are performing a ridiculous resource exhaustion because you're connecting and keeping the socket open until SMTP decides to terminate it. And you could send those requests really quickly. The only thing that changed in here, the port and the processing of the data. That's it. To think about a port is not like a port of service, it's just a bucket where I put in and it gets processed just like that. You're just telling a processor on the other side, carve it up a little differently. Everything is just raw sockets. Everything is just text or encoded in ciphertext. And the only way we find vulnerabilities as definitions and detections or even accept network traffic is it's a parser. I got to tell you what part you're caring about. And same thing with just detecting stuff. We don't get exploit detection until somebody does it and figures it out and publishes it, right? That's the core of the internet. The core of the internet is a bunch of loosely written text parsers running at speed. Fact. It really just is. So, why is all of that important? Why do you care about, it's just proxies, it's kind of like esoteric. Not really. What's really happening here is that trace verb that's in there, but that host header does something. :587. Back in the old days of the internet, that was really just telling you what web server you wanted to go to. Still works that way. But how are you supposed to use these? We have a connect verb. There is a verb in the HTTP standard that says, hey, you're supposed to use this only for use in requests in a proxy, receives a connect, and then you go, oh, there's the connect verb, and then underneath that you have the host with the port specification. Comes down to we need to make the internet really easy to connect. We had to start accounting for the fact of RFC 19. Like, we're running out of IP addresses. So we had to create ways to connect things, and the internet wasn't all that connected. And we had to start building in security. So, reading into this, the RFCs are very clear about what you should and shouldn't do or must. But remember, should is not a must. More like a suggestion. And you'll read this and like, this isn't even the only way proxies work. This is just the RFC. A tunnel is closed when the intermediary detects that either side has closed the connection. There are significant risks to establishing a tunnel this is written back then. Think about what this is saying. Risk in establishing a tunnel to arbitrary servers, particularly when the destination is a well-known reserved TCP port that is not intended for web traffic. Isn't that what I just did? Right? The payload within a connect message has no defined semantics. Sending a payload body on connect might cause some existing implementation. Like, they're building in, like, we wrote this, but nobody's going to pay attention to it. It's going to mess everything up. Now, HTTP servers, we know you can live them on any port. Web servers use that specific host header for a reason. It's effectively acting as a proxy on the host. We didn't want people typing in IP addresses. We're running out of IP addresses and ports to host web servers on, so we hacked this in to go, well, if we just read this part of the request, that's what they're looking for, we'll serve them that site. Proxies use that much differently. They're designed to read that. You send it to a proxy, it discards what you're sending it to as the address, reads that, and says that's really where that request is going. So my exploit chain for this is I submit a trace to my proxy on 443, proxy parses it, and it creates a new request. It doesn't forward my request. It creates a new request from the one I gave it. And this is the important part. The source IP address is not mine. It's the proxies. That becomes very, very, very important. But is that the only kind of proxy? No, we have reverse proxies. Didn't think about those. Web application. We have all these different things. Web application firewalls, web proxies. All of these things handle data differently. If you get like a standard small, medium business firewall, it usually has a URL inspection service or a web firewall built in. You don't even tell people about it. But they never agree. And right here is the X-forwarded for host header. I love this one. It's the de facto header for identifying it. It may differ from the origin, but here he goes. There's a standardized version of this header. It's the HTTP forwarded. Like, we have a perfectly good one, but everybody just said, F that, we're just going to use this instead. But what you're building, a proxy, a web application firewall, whatever, you're building it for maximum compatibility. So you're going to make sure it can handle anything you throw in there, because who knows what the web developer was doing. This is where we're going to turn. It's going to pick up speed real quick. I know I'm being a little wordy. Trust me, it's going to be awesome. So here it is. Every server-side request forgery you've ever seen is a proxy. And all proxies are server-side request forgery machines. Do you see it now? They're like, wait a second, a proxy is just making an HTTP request on my behalf. Same thing server-side request forgery does, except one's intended, the other one, not so much. HTTP is raw, SMTP is raw. I'm just sending encoded data down a pipe, and they have to handle HTTP traffic, and because nobody follows the standard, you got to design all of this so that I can put it in any enterprise and it works. SMTP, tons of protocols, they're all flexible. You've seen it. That isn't even the only, that's like one of 1,000 I know of to use this with. And again, you put all these things together, you can live off the land using no more than your keyboard. Like, anybody who knows me knows my work. I am like, I can tell you what, but I make things easy, simple, the lowest common denominator, minimal. Like, I'm somebody who believes, like, you know, the old Rube Goldberg machine. I don't like complex things that do something simple. I like taking simple ideas and making them do stuff that you never intended. And if you look there, it even says that's the host header. Now, don't believe me, you can do this. You can open up Edge right now, open the developer console, and you can forge your own requests. And again, proxies, web application firewalls, all these things work in raw things. So like options, everybody know what the options header is? It was really to ask a web server, what are the verbs you support? But now we hack that into an API as pre-flight options to make sure you're allowed to send this stuff. Like, we went back and redid all this stuff to make it do something else. GET requests do not carry body parameters. If you go in Edge, it will not let you do this. You cannot do that. But all I really need to do is find a method that will carry a body, will be allowed through that. So I did it. You can craft this options request in Edge exactly the way I have put it, point it to port 587, make that your body in your options request. Edge has not said anything about this. Send it, and you've just tunneled SMTP over HTTP using a method that doesn't support it, malformed and buried in a web request. If you go back and look at that from an IR perspective, from a web app, it's going to tell you that it was an incomplete HTTP request because it never got a status code back. It never parsed it. It just said, I tried and it failed. This is all the basic stuff. Now we're getting into the cool stuff. What happens when you create an HTTP request? You see this a lot. It depends on who you ask and where you ask them. So I said all proxies are server-side request forgery machines and vice versa. So let's find a proxy that is specifically designed to be a server-side request forgery machine. An online web proxy. One of those ones you go in, type a URL, and then they send you lots of ads and stuff. This is one of them. And you'll look, if you see my DNS name down there, the a.b.c, everybody see that? That's going to become very important in a second. But essentially, all I'm doing is going to this proxy, typing in a URL, and you see on the other side it comes out. It visited it, that's the request. But what happens when I just change the port of my web request to 25? It's HTTP. I sent it. Collaborator tells you that's SMTP. That proxy will tell you it didn't complete, it's a problem. See how this works now? It's the same thing. It's just a GET request. So let's go back to DNS real quick and why that a.b.c value is very, I'm not kidding when I tell you this. You can potentially bring down websites and the internet with that string. No BS, going to show you in a second. This is the RFC for DNS. And more ambiguity. What is a valid DNS name? Well, what's the limit? 255 octets. Some of these can be changed, some are more fundamental. So when somebody wrote this, or many people wrote that, they were literally like, we just got to put something to paper and whatever. Now, what are the requirements for an FQDN? I look at this and I salivate. Alphanumerics, hyphens, bunch of characters. That's enough to build a protocol right there. That's enough to build web exploits. I've actually used this to get remote code execution, a bunch of other stuff. And it goes, if it doesn't fit this, you have these escape codes, but there's a little thing down here about when using dot as a delimiter between labels, you do not need to use an escape code. You use those little dots to tell the other, like the DNS server, this is a subdomain all the way out, nesting it out. So, one more. What's the maximum length of a DNS name? Nobody will even agree on this. You can go to Microsoft site, they will tell you 248 characters. You go to Cisco site, they'll tell you 250. Nobody will even agree on this. But the limit on this is that you can't have a sub like label longer than 63 characters. Does anybody see anything missing in here? There is absolutely nothing telling you what the maximum amount of subdomains is. I know you're getting, like I can see people like, oh, I get, okay. So what is DNS recursion? DNS recursion is how the internet works. On the left-hand side, you see it. Right-hand side, I had to ask AI because everybody asks AI these days. It's how it works. When you say, I want to see www.google.com, it goes out, goes to the TLD, then goes to Google, and then goes. So it's requesting and making a request all the way down the line. If it's never been seen before, it's going to go out and resolve all of this. The whole point of it is it only ever has to resolve a domain once and then caches it forever, or for a long amount of time for the TTL to expire. So, anybody know what DNS recursion is as an attack? This is a CISA article. Sends the following matter. A malicious attacker sends several thousand spoofed requests to a DNS server that allows recursion. DNS processes this request as valid, sends the DNS replies. Attacker could generate a multi-gigabit flood of DNS replies. This is known as an amplifier attack. Recent surveys said that 75% of DNS servers they polled allowed recursion. An organization can be used as a DNS recursion amplifier if its DNS is misconfigured, right? So generating them and getting replies is the denial of service that everybody knows out. We all agree, oh my God, you shouldn't do that. Well, what happens when you just create that request? You see all those requests up the top? For every single subdomain I have injected in there, it creates a new DNS request from one HTTP request. So I always say, fear anybody who owns a 4-character domain like I do. Why do I own 4-character domains? Because for me, that's 249 more characters to stuff subdomains in and create havoc. You can test this. Go put in an FQDN, all that stuff out, and you will see exactly what I saw at the top. Like this is a limited one, and it generated 667 different DNS requests. Oh, and an HTTP request. Got it so far? You follow me? Kind of making a little more sense? All right. I showed a bunch of free tools and sites, whatever else. Who cares? Right? All right, cool, whatever. Everything is a proxy if you try hard enough, right? So let's look at something more interesting. Mozilla GetPocket CDN. Anybody know what this is? You open up Mozilla, you get little thumbnails, little pictures, whatever else, you get ads. GetPocket CDN is for delivering to you thumbnails, images, advertising, whatever, through Mozilla. It's one of the ways that they can get around serving you ads if you have an ad blocker. It's actually getting proxied through Mozilla's content delivery network. There are some things to the URL up in the top right. I chopped all of it out because it's entirely unnecessary. All you need to do to that is put in a URI. There's strict content type checking where if it's not a gzip or it's not an image, the GET request fires, but you get nothing back. See it? Like you get multiple DNS requests and HTTP request. Now, that's a port scanner. That's a content enumerator. That's a website delivery mechanism. All you need to do is add to a colon at the back of that thing and go through all the commonly used ports and then read the replies you get. If something is there and answers, and it's not there. You'll get a 400 where it says it's a bad request, or it'll show you whatever. If it's not answering on the other end, blocking whatever, you get a 504. So just using that from get pocket's IP address, basically anonymized because there's zillions of requests that go through it, I have a port scanner. Cool so far? Way more than that, bro. For example, if you want to go find admin interfaces on the internet, because you can put any port you want in, you look for default images like the favicon of an admin interface, and it goes through. I know that exists because that's somebody's administrator interface on the internet. I didn't go wild with port scanning. I just went, here this is, and then do me a favor, just find some images. You basically it would be really impossible to get from that side to figure out that I've done this. Well, you can actually alter that request, play with the encoding a little bit, and if you look on the right-hand side, I'm issuing arbitrary GET requests. I'm issuing an arbitrary API call. Now, you can look it up. I have many critical exploits, including one on the CISA KEV that creates one of the world's largest botnets, and it's a GET request. I always reduce server-side request forgeries and exploits down to GET requests because of this. Because I am going to send, I didn't do it, I'm lawful, I don't do any of that, but you can send that GET request through GetPocket, and good luck. You created a botnet, and nobody will find you. Where did it come from? It came from GetPocket. If you don't believe me, scan that QR code. I hosted that on Imager. You can go to that URL, it will proxy it through to you, and that's a message I base 64 encoded. So essentially, I'm hiding behind the SSL certificate of GetPocket. So good luck using SSL or inspection to find any of this. And what's the maximum amount of information you can put in a QR code? Well, 2953, 4296, depends on the version, but basically 3 kilobytes of data, which is larger than a TCP IP packet is. All you need to do is understand that instead of just serving a static image, you can go on my GitHub and get my QR code tunneler that will answer basically GET requests, like you encode a URL, it will grab the website, encode it in QR codes, and send it back to you through the chain. So now I have two-way communications through an image proxy. That's public with a public IP address. That's one thing. I'm kind of building to something here. All right, again, free tools, who cares? So what happens when you create an HTTP request? It's relative. Every one of these requests creates at least one DNS request and one HTTP request. And these are not the same. What you're seeing at the top is like, it's either one or, no, it's not. It's the way it works. While I'm proxying through to that host, what's really happening is what's happening on the bottom end. That proxy is essentially acting like a new web browser, URL generator, and it's sending a DNS request and an HTTP request, grabbing it, and then returning it back to you. So, DNS records can be anything. They can be RFC 1918 addresses, even on the internet. I control that. So if I SSRF to a DNS record that I'm injecting with an RFC 1918 address to a server, what's happening? Well, it's doubling the amount of requests I'm sending in terms of like volume. But if that's sitting inside of an RFC 1918 address, and I got a server-side request forgery, and I can make any port and whatever else, if I'm issuing it to an RFC 1918 address, what happens? It stays inside the network. Stuff I can't get to. I can essentially bounce this request off of a server and talk to the internal network completely over the internet. Trust me, it works. I'm going to show you in a second. So what's happening here is those are all DNS requests that are getting created from that. But if you look where the arrows are, if you look at 5EAA, again, it's going through and recursing, but I use 5EAA as, I'm using it as like a marker. It's like a sequence number. And then the data I'm going to exfiltrate is exfiltrated data. I can encode whatever I want. This is how DNS tunneling works. Now, POC or GTFO is my religion. Everybody else is like, I am the POC. I don't care about being ostentatious, fancy, or whatever else. I'm like, I'm one of those people. I just go out and kill stuff. I'm not announcing. I just go at it. So I have 2 of these that were responsibly disclosed to Microsoft. They handled it very well, but there's a problem. I will say this, I cut this out. Be responsible, be ethical, be lawful, do not FAFO, do the right thing. Because it's not about getting the lulz or being famous or being on Twitter or else. Like, we're at that point now where as you're watching what we're doing, it's like, it's more than about being whatever else. Like, we're so integrated and the world is being so built on all of this. Like, being a good person, following the rules, whatever else, it's more than about you. Like, who would have thought back then that visiting a website or doing any of this would kill somebody, but lo and behold, 30 years later, we're in that sort of possibility. Don't try it. Anybody know what Windows Spotlight is? Windows Spotlight is the thing that feeds you wallpapers, ads, suggestions, all of these wonderful messages to you. Then you get those little annoying Windows 10 and 11 boxes like, you need to, like, that's how it works. So it's a core part of Windows. If you look in the top right here, it says the following endpoints are used to retrieve Spotlight. Windows, like, if you turn off traffic, Windows will still try to deliver a lock screen, but will fail. Suggested apps, Microsoft account notifications, none of it will work. You start blocking that stuff out. So it has this little request in here that you have no idea actually exists. Next time you're playing with your Windows machine, turn on the entire system proxy, sit there, open up a browser, and you'll see this surreptitiously pass by, this post-auction endpoint. What's happening is when you open up Edge or do this other stuff, it's actually quietly looking at what you're looking at and sending it to Microsoft for ad scrapers to go through, look at, get these messages, what have you. So that's your base request. Is that a server-side request forgery, or is that a content delivery network? It's both. In fact, this one's much easier than GetPocket because I can just directly encode stuff into it. So I did. I base64 encoded the iCar file. Anybody know what the iCar file is? Very useful. I'm going to do a talk one day about all of the offensive uses of the iCar file. It is amazing. I'm going to talk about it a little bit. But I base64 encoded iCar, put it in this request to Microsoft, like through SRTB, and it came out on the other side. Have I not created a data traffic and protocol tunnel? I did. Not only that, you can feed it my A.B.C.D.E.F, whatever. And it goes through and starts parsing subdomains all the way back out. So from one request in Spotlight in the background, what I'm doing is what? Creating a massive denial of service attack based off these DNS names and HTTP requests. The request itself, most of the parameters are in there. You can just take them out. You can infinitely replay that request. So I did. I tell people all the time, always SSRF the iCar file. Always do it. Always check what's happening on the server, because you look here, that FQDN is file01.txt, my FQDN to get it, and then the encoded iCar file at the end. I have tunneled something through Microsoft's ad delivery network, picked it up somewhere else, and nothing detected it. Why? Well, I'm actually getting best effort delivery. For every domain I put in, it's doing that. For every unique subdomain that hasn't been seen there, it's creating new ones. So this is literally just going out. On the left-hand side, you see it churning these DNS requests. Now, here's where it gets a little wacky. You can do the same thing with the ports, but these requests are not being delivered by Microsoft. They're being delivered by their ad partners. You can see it in the client string. I didn't generate that. That's not my client string. That's the one for that ad network. So the crazy part about this, that one request continued to be sent, DNS flood and all, for weeks. Weeks. I would watch Collaborator as I started seeing like DNS requests go like boom, 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 and it's just like came in waves because multiple integrators were picking that up and visiting it. Since it's an arbitrary GET request, think about this. If it's accidentally scraped an authenticated GET request from your browser, sent to a third party, and then they visit it and your application is external, what has happened? Something has accidentally, potentially signed into your web application. because it visited a URL that you didn't know it got sent. So I use 465. Why? Because 465 is also SMTP. So I show you here, you can actually mess with it to do this. File 01 there, I replayed it, and in fact, I'm using segmentation and my FQDNs and whatever else to ensure that my best effort delivery of this multi-segmented file reassembles the right way. Doesn't that sound like TCP/IP? How TCP/IP works? We got the sequence number. Easy as hell to do. Now, where I'm all about. I am all about finding new weird stuff that nobody thought about. That's my drug of choice. Nobody ever thought of that. So you can actually watch my, I did a talk for AppSec Village at DEF CON a couple years ago. I actually go super deep into status code injection, how I got remote code execution, everything else through it. But this is Office 365 in Exchange. Server-side request forgery, denial of service, tunneling via an unsent email. I did not send this email, but you can flood anything with it. It's right in the bottom right corner. This is it. Whenever you type into an email in OWA and your HTTP, whatever else, you ever notice like all of a sudden it starts showing you little preview stuff and then not and whatever else? You're not making that request. You are sending that post request to Exchange, who then turns it into a server-side request forgery for you. All you need to do is edit that. If you look in the bottom right-hand corner, it says error, title and description not found. Every single DNS and arbitrary get technique I've already given you works with that request. It's essentially a proxy. I got arbitrary request, arbitrary ports, whatever. Like I said, I'm a minimalist. What I'm interested in is I like exploiting stuff with very strong limits. Give me 64 bytes, I like working on that. So what I'm here for is server-side request forgery, DNS rebinding, errors, and status codes. So you can see there, all this stuff works. I was flooding millions of DNS requests through Office 365 to an arbitrary host in Microsoft's cloud. Anybody who knows anything about Exchange, Exchange in the cloud is essentially the same thing as Exchange on-prem. So this doesn't only work in 365. If you were pen testing somebody that has an Exchange server, you can use this. It's patched. You might not be able to still, but if they're not patched, it'll work. Now, I am interested in that because when you type that in, the top message is what you get when it connects and there's nothing there. Title and description not found. But look at that bottom right one. Error 429, too many requests. That's an HTTP status code for overloading something. Why is it sending too many requests? I bet you know what I did from Office 365. So I'm into HTTP status code injection. I love it. I've gone deep on it. I don't think anybody else has ever done this. When you look at web controls, when you look at IR stuff, forensic stuff, whatever else, nobody stores the text of an HTTP status code. You get the number code, but you don't get the text. Who would store that? It's nonsense, right? That is completely an unsanitized space. So I created, and you go watch my DEF CON talk, I created my own HTTP code, 666, right? It's unsanitized space. I put it in there. I created a really stupid Python server that does it. This is like the very pared down version, but it comes through. I have tunneled internally from an unsent email the ICAR file to an internal host using the unsanitized HTTP status code. I put ICAR in there, tunneled it through, it worked. Why? Because wherever this Exchange server is, it's inside of a firewall. It carries an RFC 1918 address. I can generate traffic from it, which means I inherit all of its egress and ingress firewall rules, right? I can direct traffic to an RFC 1918 address. I can enumerate egress firewall rules, all of these things, and deliver targeted GET requests that are malicious to servers. So here's what I started to do inside of Azure, inside of Exchange servers, what have you. Very simply here, I just gave the Exchange server in Azure 127.0.0.1. Why is that interesting? It's the loopback address, right? Is there a firewall on 127.0.1? No, it's internal. It never leaves the stack.
Almost every security control completely ignores it. And I love when developers bind stuff to 127.0.0.1 thinking nobody can ever get into it. And they're like, I got an SSRF on that machine, it's gonna put me right in. This is how it works. And then I put a different port, 3390. That's not RDP, it's like one port higher. But if you look at that error message, and keep in mind I did this in the cloud, no connection could be made because the target machine actively refused it. 127.0.0.1, 3390. But if you put in 3389, you get a much different answer. What happens is you can use that as a port scanner. So I did. I did this in Azure. I went, scan these IP addresses. And then only thing I was really doing on my, not in Azure, on the targeted on-prem one, was I didn't change the IP address. I just changed the A record in DNS. So if anybody came back and looked at it later, it would either be gone or not telling you I'm sending it an RFC 1918 address. How many of you are IR people and would pull your hair out trying to figure that one out? Oh yeah, I set all of my TTLs to 10 minutes. The reason being, I can iterate through all of those FQDNs, the malicious ones, in more than 10 minutes, and if the TTL is only 10 minutes, all of my old cache requests are automatically dying out and creating, going, I don't have a DNS for it, or I don't have an IP for this, generate some more. I get amplification, not in this one, but in other instances of this, from one request to millions to billions of requests. Why? Well, interesting thing here. Anybody who knows Active Directory, I'm a big Active Directory nut. DNS in Microsoft Active Directory by default is recursive. You have to turn it off to make this not work. So you don't even need Exchange, you just need to be an Active Directory environment and query, for example, one of my domains, corp.xyz. I bought that because if you go back and look at 80s and 90s and documentation, whatever else, everybody used that as a domain that would never be available. So like big time in the router stuff. I use that. Anything you send, this is my domain that I own, corp.xyz. It's wildcarded to 127.0.0.1 with a TTL of 10 minutes. All I am doing is SSRFing my FQDN where I change the IP address out. From an external OWA host sent to an internal one, I am now pivoting inside your network, crafting arbitrary requests, arbitrary things, port scanning, all that other stuff. It's also recursive, so if you want to use I would really prefer you didn't, but if you want to test it for yourself, you can put any domain you want in with as many subdomains, and you're going to get 127.0.0.1 back. From this, I was successfully able to talk to servers and ports inside of people's environments that you absolutely shouldn't, that it's impossible, that it's an RFC 1918 address that you can't get to. But with a simple server-side request forgery and a little stick-to-itiveness, I made it work. This is what I'm getting at. All of these technologies, all of this comes from emergent properties of things. In the 90s, we built this, now we built that. And we built it out of all this. I responsibly disclosed this, I used all of this, they all acknowledge it. It's a cool thing to look at. But, like I said, there are an infinite number of these you can now find. You know how to find them, you know how to test them, and that they're essentially proxies. You can start building your own protocol. So the pregnant question I always get, and I always tell you when you're learning how to speak with people, always give them the answer. Like, don't present a problem without an answer. So how do we fix this? I have no effing idea. I have talked to some very, very smart people who were like, I always get this. I do new exploits. They're like, well, that's just abuse of functionality. I know, that's what hacking is. Like, it's abusing functionality. Or you would have to change I know you have to change the internet, genius. That's why I'm here asking you what your opinion is. I'm not the pilot of this plane, and I thought you were. That was that scary moment of like getting to the cockpit of the internet, if you will, and going, where's the pilot? And everybody goes, I thought you were the pilot. Why are you asking me how to fix it? I didn't design this, but I really have no idea how to fix this because it's baked into the internet. You're going to have to write RFCs, all these controls over top to fix this fundamental problem that exists. And this is just me skimming across the top. I go mega deep on all of this. I'm giving you the quick version. So here is my lesson out of this. I don't want you to fix this because it's impossible. I want you to get the message. I am not an I told you so guy. I don't spike the football. It's just not who I am. My experience of literally hacking for like 40 years of my life since I was little is this. It has become very evident to me, and you live long enough in this field, you're going to find out we don't fix problems, we put new technology in front of it. Then we hope it dies. I didn't invent any of this. Nobody in this room invented anything like it comes here. We learn from somebody else. Everybody starts somewhere. Like, I do a lot of teaching, I train people, and it's like, oh, I feel like everybody has been there. The secret to succeeding, getting to these parts of the world, is you don't give up, right? Some days you can't do that. Like, I'm going to do it. I always feel like, I'm the hold my beer guy, I'm going to try, right? We did a really poor job the first time around. I was kind of led off with this saying, like, as long as you understand the concepts of what we're doing, like a SQL injection is no different than a cross-site scripting, except on a different port using different language to do exactly the same thing. I'm injecting code that shouldn't be there. If somebody thought about that way back then, you wouldn't have SQL injection, you wouldn't have cross-site scripting. All of that is emerging. So my advice to you is, as you're building what is going to be the internet for the next 50 years, all of you, we're all basically the policemen of the internet, right? We're hackers, we're like IR people, like you are the only control. Trust me as this, I'm somebody who hacks big stuff, and I'm like, the only way this ever gets fixed is I gotta go out and tell them or make it a problem. What you need to do is, you're not fixing this. As you're building your stuff out, AI, LLM, all these other crazy things you're doing, don't make the same stupid mistakes that we did, right? Work a little bit harder. Think about what you're doing. Be very ethical and responsible, because it's like I think about, like, you're building LLM now, and you're building MCPs, all this other stuff. You're like, in 50 years from now, what's this going to do to my kids? Like, it sounds like a goofy question, but that's where we're at. Really, it comes down to this. I've done this a really long time. The biggest problem I see from a technical standpoint, especially in fixing this, is nobody thinks before they fix a problem. You get a really critical vulnerability, and everybody goes off to the races to fix it as fast as is humanly possible. And that's where the problems start, because if you made one bad decision, making another quick bad decision isn't going to solve it. Consider the future and how some moron like me will come along and abuse the functionality. And if I ever run into you and you tell me it's an abuse of functionality and not a real exploit, I will level your app. Count on it. So that's all I have for you guys. I really enjoyed talking to you guys. Anybody have any questions after all of that? Besides if I actually breathe between sentences. Anybody? All right, cool. You can ask me after. I'm a big supporter of ethical research, responsible disclosure. I will talk shop 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. I'm really introverted and on the spectrum, but if you talk to me about hacking, I will talk your ear off for the next 8 hours. I want to bring people into the field. Everybody starts somewhere. If you see me walking around, I'm not a social media type, but I do have a LinkedIn address and profile, whatever. Drop me a line. I do a lot of weird stuff. I do a lot of weird exploitation across a lot of stuff, and I love teaching people, sharing stuff. I always offer this to people, you want to learn something? Ask me a question. I will be more than happy. I teach this stuff. I do a lot of that. I really enjoy working with people. For me, I didn't get a start in the industry. I had to elbow my way in. And for me, I'm one of those, I like the way with the bridges I burn. Like, I want you to all get in there. I had to elbow my way in. I don't want you to have to. I want you to take the playbook, myself and a lot of other people did, so you can actually progress the ball and stop recreating the same damn problem. Because that's where we're at. All right? Thank you very much, everybody. I super appreciate it.